What's up everyone, it's Caddy with MoneyVest Real Estate. So I've got great news and I've got not so great news in this video that I wanted to break down, and I'm also going to go over my plans with real estate over the next few months here in the coming months and years. And also, this is going to be a bit of a value-packed video because I'm going to be going over some of the numbers. We're going to have a very nice, lively discussion because the focus of today's video is going to be on the US markets. And as always, if you enjoy it, find it helpful, please make sure that you drop a like. I would really appreciate that, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're trying to get to almost 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month, and I would really appreciate your support. And as always, if you have any questions, please leave them down below, and I'll try to get back to them as soon as possible in the comments section. So let's start with the great news. And the great news is that I have now qualified for financing in the US. Okay. Now, there's a new loan product. Well, it's not new, but it's a loan product that I'm qualified for because I don't really qualify for conventional financing. So I can't get a traditional home loan or a mortgage in the US because I don't have a W-2. I don't actually work for any company in the US. I don't live in the US. I'm not a US citizen or resident. And for that reason, I can't get a conventional traditional financing in the US. But what I could get is another loan product called a DSCR loan. And a DSCR loan stands for Debt Service Coverage Ratio. And the difference between this loan and conventional loans is because conventional loans and the more traditional route of financing for homes, the lenders look at your personal income, your personal statements, and your personal finances, right? So your credit score and a lot of other factors involving your personal finances. With a DSCR loan, the lender does not look at the borrower, right? So me as being the borrower of this loan, the lender will have very little interest in me as a borrower. And it's a low doc sort of loan product, right? It's mostly geared towards investors who don't qualify for the traditional financing like myself. But what will they look at is the real estate itself, the property itself, and can it actually cover the four things which are PITI, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. If the property's rental income or the expected rental income is enough to cover the property's PITI, then that loan is valid and can be lent to the borrower. Go over that in a little bit more detail because there's some other requirements as well. But really, in a nutshell, a DSCR is a debt service coverage ratio loan, or a DSCR loan geared towards real estate investors and is based on the property's cash flow to cover the debt instead of the real estate investor's personal finances. And if you come over to some of the requirements, so term, 30-year fixed, you can get that. The minimum loan requirement is $150,000. So you can't borrow $100,000 using a DSCR because the minimum is $150,000. The maximum, it says $3 million. I haven't heard that from the lenders, but we'll go off of that, $3 million. Minimum FICO, from what I've heard from the lenders that I've been working with, is 700. But on this website, it says 660. And the rates, of course, are going to be much higher than your traditional conventional financing. So if I go over to another source here, so if you go over to this DSCR loan interest rates, what you'll notice is that you've got a 5-year treasury at 4.62% as of the time of this video. You've got a DSCR low of 7.92 and a DSCR high of 8.92. The rate that I've been qualified for, or what I've been quoted, is 8.5%. And that's the not so great news. So my next step really is that I am going to be investing in the US markets. I'm planning a trip over to the US. It's my annual trip to the US. I'm going to be exploring places like Miami, Texas, New Hampshire, Boston, Long Island, New Jersey, some of those areas. I will be visiting. I'll be there for about 3 to 4 weeks. And I'll just be exploring those markets. And I've been doing a lot of analysis recently for my next deal. Because the interesting thing is that even though the DSCR loans are really, really high, or the rates are really high at 7.5 to 8.5%, of course, there's an opportunity to refinance later down the road if interest rates do come down, which, again, we've been covering the Federal Reserve and the monetary policy on our other channel for a very long time. So if interest rates come down, there's always an opportunity to refinance. And number two, you can play around with the numbers, right? As I've always said, real estate is obviously a game of numbers. So is the stock market. You decide what offer to put down. You decide what makes a good deal. You plug in all the numbers. Your outputs are just as good as your inputs. So we can play around with the numbers. I'm going to go over the spreadsheet now, and you can see where my head's at, right? What am I thinking about? And you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not thinking it straight, if I have any loopholes in this sort of way of thinking, you can correct me in the comment section down below. Because again, this is a learning process for all of us so that we can have a more lively discussion and better understand the market dynamics. I'm also going to be going over the factors which I will be considering in picking a market. Because if I'm going to be entering the US market with such a high interest rate, the barrier to entry, of course, is, not low. I need to be sure about one thing, and that is location. Location is perhaps one of the most important things when it comes to real estate. And for that very reason, I'm going to be looking at multiple different factors to better understand what location makes sense for me to enter the US markets. So this right here is the spreadsheet that I want to go over. And as I said earlier, it's a low doc loan product. The minimum down payment, which they didn't mention, is 25%. So I need to put down at least 25%. So I need to have 75% LTV, loan to value, for the lender. The minimum loan amount, of course, $150,000. And this right here is both a prepayment and a refinance penalty. So the way they've structured this, and this is what I've heard from the lenders that I've been working with, is depending on the lender, I'm either going to get a 5-4-3-2-1 or a 3-2-1 refinance or a prepayment penalty. And what this means is that this is every single year. So let's say that I get a loan for DSCR. If I refinance in the first year, right? Or if I prepay the entire loan in the first year. In other words, whatever that note is, whatever that loan is, if I write it all off, whether it's through prepayment or refinance, I will pay a 5% or a 3% prepayment or a refinance penalty. Depending on, again, the lender, depending on the program they have, it could either be 5-4-3-2-1 or a 3-2-1. If it's a 3-2-1, on the first year, I'll pay a 3% prepayment penalty or refinance penalty. In year 2, it's going to be 2%. In year 3, it's going to be 1%. And in year 4, it's not going to be anything. I can prepay the entire loan or I can refinance at no penalty with whatever the rates are. The income to PITI ratio, of course, needs to be over 1. So let's say a property generates rent of $2,000 and my principal, interest, taxes, and insurance comes up to around $1,700. So that is a very solid income to PITI ratio. It's over 1 because the rent is more than the PITI. If it's below the PITI, the rent is, let's say, $2,000 and the PITI comes in at $2,200, then it won't work. I wouldn't qualify and I won't be able to get that loan. What that would mean is then I need to put down more money, let's say 40% or more, in order to bring my principal and interest down so that that ratio is still above 1. So hope that makes sense. So what I've done here is that I've essentially put together a whole table of the numbers that I need to hit in order for a deal to work. And what I've done here is that I've essentially kept the loan amount at $150,000. Okay, because that is the bare minimum. That is the minimum that I can borrow. That is the minimum I need to borrow in order for a DSCR to work, right? So $150,000 is the minimum that I need to at least borrow in a DSCR. And I want to take advantage of leverage. I don't want to plow in all this cash into a deal and then just get 4 or 5% net returns. Although that would be decent and I would have some, upside on the capital appreciation, I really want to take advantage of both equity paydown, capital appreciation, and cash flow. Right? Tax benefits don't apply to me because I'm a resident of the UAE, so I don't really pay personal income or capital gains tax. So really the 3 out of the 4 benefits I want to take advantage of, which is the equity paydown, the capital appreciation, and the cash flow. If I give up equity paydown, then I'm really just, getting cash flow, which is something that I could get anywhere else. And I'm also just banking on capital appreciation, which may or may not happen. So I don't want to do that. With equity paydown, at least you've got that certainty. It's kind of like forced saving that the tenant is buying the property for you and is you're owning a little bit each month. So that is the huge benefit that, leverage comes into play. It's a huge benefit. So that's exactly why, people buy real estate using mortgages so that they can allow for their tenants to pay the property for them. So it's a huge benefit that I really want to take advantage of. So $150,000, of course, the minimum loan amount. If you got 25% down payment all the way through 80% down payment. So those are the different down payments I have. So over here, you can see the different down payments. The closing cost, I've kind of set that around $5,000, which again, could be higher, could be lower, depending on the size of the deal. So right now, I've kind of kept a flat rate of $5,000, which I'm sure is going to be much higher in bigger deals, but we're going to just go with it. And then we got a total estimated cash outlay of this much money, which is including your down payment and for closing cost. This is how much it would take for me to essentially close the deal. And again, just ignore the closing cost because I know depending on the size of the deal, that number is going to be different. Now, in terms of the purchase price, obviously, if I want to keep the $150,000 minimum loan amount and my down payment is changing in every scenario, that is going to be the purchase price. And my first ideal deal that I was looking for was going to be somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000. And now we come to the not so great news. You can't really find anything that's worth buying at between $200,000 and $250,000, especially the desirable markets that I want to be in, which is New Hampshire, Boston, down south in Florida. There's a couple places that David and I have been talking about: Ocala, Florida, and then in Texas and kind of like the Sunbelt areas. I'm looking at Dallas, North Dallas, specifically North Dallas, and you can't really find anything there. Fort Worth, you can find properties between 200 and 250, but I haven't analyzed that market all that well, so I need to do more research in that market. And then I'm also looking at Austin, Texas, and Houston. Austin more specifically because there's been a lot of influx of companies moving there. HP, Tesla, just to name a few, have moved recently to Austin. There's been a lot of job creation. Prices are now starting to cool off, but again, it's an expensive market, and I doubt, I haven't been able to find anything that's between $200,000 and $250,000. So that's the problem. The good news is that yes, I do qualify for financing. The good news is that yes, I'm ready to move forward with investing in U.S. equity, U.S. real estate market. But the not so great news is the markets are very hot. Prices are extremely high in the more desirable markets. So if you have any markets in mind, please do comment down below because I'm really open to all markets in the U.S., all 50 states, all cities. I'm going to be doing a lot of research, a lot of analysis in this particular sort of area. And we'll learn more about the different market dynamics. One of the most important things is population growth. Are people actually moving into that city or state, or are they moving out? So if you come down, I'm going to come back to the spreadsheet here, but if you come over to some of the factors that I'm considering when it comes to investing in real estate, especially in the US, is location. Location, very, very important, which obviously, goes hand in hand by nearby amenities such as grocery stores, gyms, public transportation, cafes, restaurants, laundromats, malls, entertainment. I don't really want to have any condos or apartments and pay HOAs because the capital appreciation is very limited in condominiums and of course apartments. So I really want to have an independent house where you're also of course owning the land itself, so no HOA. So maintenance is going to be taken care of by the tenant or a property management company. And I'm also going to be looking at median household income, companies and businesses that are already there or are planning to move there in that particular city or town or state. Jobs demographics, so what's the job, breakdown, what industry do people work at the most? Very important net population growth in terms of both immigration and people born and raised there. Are people moving into that city, out of that city? So in the last, I would say a couple of years, Dallas, Texas, Austin, Fort Worth, Houston, like Texas in general, has seen a significant amount of net inflow of people. And California, for the first time in 20 years, has seen people moving out of that state. So people are actually moving out of California and New York, probably because of the housing prices that have gone up significantly, and especially with work from home. And they're moving where? Texas, down south in Florida, the Carolinas. Those are the states that are actually doing much better in terms of population growth and crime rate, safety. So not every neighborhood is built equally. Every neighborhood has its pros and cons. And of course, crime and safety, very, very important. The school district that it belongs to, walkability and supply of new homes and inventory that's coming up in that state or city. If I missed anything on this list, please do let me know. But these are the things that I will be analyzing for every single market before I finally drill down on, okay, that this is the market that I really want to be in. Long term, this is a market that I actually buy and of course rent out to very good tenants for the long term. But these are some of the factors that I'm going to be looking into very, very closely. So going back over to our spreadsheet. So if we know the minimum loan amount has to be 150, the down payment is going to be somewhere between 50 and 100. Total estimated cash outlay is going to be this. And based on this calculation of 8.5% interest rate, which obviously is a very, very high rate, over a 30-year period, we're looking at a principal and interest payment of just over $1,150 to as much as $1,166. So that is going to be that number. So that basically remains the same, right? Because I've kept the loan amount the same at $150,000 at 8.5% over 30-year fixed. So that's $1,153. In terms of taxes and insurance, again, ignore this as the deal gets bigger and bigger. But I've kind of estimated that it's most likely going to be somewhere between $600 and $500 to $600 per month for taxes and insurance. Most properties that I've analyzed, they've been assessed for about $5 to $6 grand a year in property taxes, and insurance quotes that I've received have been anywhere between $50 to $120 a month for homeowners insurance. So again, these estimates are just estimates. These are not actual quotes. These are not accurate estimates. In other words, not property specific, but just a general idea of where these numbers would be for those specific things. So of course, principal interest is the exact number. Taxes, insurance is an estimate of $600 a month. So my total PITI comes at around $1,753 per month. And I'm also, so even though I would qualify for the loan itself, because I think most properties that I've looked at in Dallas or Fort Worth or Houston or Ocala, Florida, are going to rent for anywhere between $1,800 to as much as $2,000. So that's not a problem because the loan itself is not an issue, because I know I would qualify and the lender would be okay with lending me money because of the down payment and also the rental income covering for the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. The problem is that I will most likely not cash flow because the properties don't qualify for the 1% test. In other words, the rent itself is not 1% of the property price. So 1753 is the PITI. Now, if I account for all the other expenses that I account for being conservative, which is going to be vacancies, property management, capital expenditures, and repairs and maintenance, because I actually do account for that, which is about 25 to 30% of the rent that I'm going to be putting aside for vacancies, management, capex, and repairs and maintenance, comes around $750 a month, depending on rent at $2,500. And even then, I am not cash flowing on these numbers here on these deal. It really needs to be, rent needs to be $2,550 in order for me to cash flow just $31 per month, which is on a net cash on cash basis, a really, really low number of less than 1%. So net cash on cash, a very abysmal, less than 1%. But again, this is not the real IRR. The internal rate of return is also going to account for the equity paydown and the potential for capital appreciation. So this is not the actual real return. This is simply the net cash on cash, how much I've invested and how much I'm getting out each month. That's the calculation, which of course I like to be somewhere between 4 and 5%. So what needs to happen? Couple things. I'm going to play around with these numbers and you can see that live. Number one, either the rent goes up to, let's say, $2,800, right? So $2,800, that's more than enough to cover the PITI and my budgets here. And now I'm net cash flowing $200 a month and my net cash on cash at 4.5%. Perfect. Amazing. But find me a deal that's going to be $200,000 purchase price, rented for $2,800, unless it's in a really, really bad neighborhood. So it's most likely out there, but it's not going to meet these criterias, right? Especially the crime and safety criteria, because I don't think there's any deal out there in the US that's going to be bought for $200,000 and be rented for $2,800 per month. So not possible, right? It's probably not going to happen. If you have anything, let me know in the comment section down below. So that's the number one thing that we tried. The second thing that I could try is that if you go further out in terms of the actual purchase price, so let's say that we start looking at $250,000 to $300,000 properties, same PITI, I'm going to have to put down obviously a lot more than $50,000, closer to 100 to 150 grand, same PITI, same, of course, the budgets. And now if you look at rents, which even if it's not, let's say 1%, even if it goes up to, for this example, if it goes up to $2,800, now we're looking at $206 in net cash flow with a 1.6% net cash on cash. And this is a purchase price of $300,000 with me putting down 50% down, which is $150,000. Same interest rate, same PITI, same budgets, but it needs to rent for $2,800. So this, I think, would be a very ideal scenario for me, where I look at a property price of $300,000. I put down 150 grand. My PITI comes at around 1750, and the place is rented for $2,800. which again doesn't meet the 1% test, because if you do $2,800 divided by 300,000, it's going to be close to 0.93%. But even that, I think, is going to be very difficult to find. 0.93%. I feel like it's going to be difficult to find even in this market because of how expensive prices are relative to the rents that you can get. So that's where we are. There's a couple things obviously I can do. Is I can wait for interest rates to come down, because look what happens when interest rates are down at, let's say, 4%. So right now my PITI is $1,750. Even if I drop down the rents to, let's say, $2,400, which again, even high at these levels, it's probably going to be $1,800, which of course means $500 net loss every month. Now look what happens if I drop these rates down to 4%. So if DSCR was at 4%, now my PITI drops down to $1,300, and now I'm almost break even on this property at $1,800 rent. So it's really just a couple different games here that I'm looking at. Is either either I get a really high rent or I get lower interest rates, which both of them I'm gonna have to wait for, because interest rates are really high. If they drop down to 5%, 4%, then of course that would be much better. So those are some things to consider that I'm looking at. Or I have to find a deal which is going to be incredibly distressed, right? So it's a $300,000 property that I'm able to buy, let's say, for $250,000, and it still rents at $2,800 or $2,700. Because if I'm able to buy, let's say, a $300,000 home for $250,000, which again, very, very unlikely that it's going to happen, $250,000, then of course my PITI drops down to under $1,400, and even at $2,400, I'm netting about $311 in cash each month. So those are some of the analysis that I'm doing. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'm still kind of playing around with the numbers, looking at different areas, because I do know that by the end of this year, I do want to enter into the US markets with at least one property and have at least one property under my belt. But we'll see how that goes. So hope you all enjoy this video, found it helpful. Make sure that you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Happy investing, and I'll see you all in the next video.